First, I would like certainly to thank you for being here, to thank my friends, and to thank you for come to say hello and to get together in the name of peace and friendship and understanding. This is a very moving occasion for me. I'm about to say certainly not goodbye, see you again soon. I know how to express it sort of Russian. They have das svidaniya, but they have paka. That's just around the corner there. See you tomorrow. But I certainly hope to be able to get back very soon again. But I am saying a kind of farewell tomorrow to a country which certainly has treated us so warmly and with such deep understanding. I'm not given to sort of hyperbole in this sense. Always feel that people might think you're not quite saying what you feel. But it has certainly been one of the great tours of my whole life. And I'm glad I came, not glad that I couldn't get to you before, I must say. I would have liked to have come to you long before. But happy that it could come at this time of my own life, which has been a sort of gathering together of many strands. After years of difficulties, we have all had our difficulties, but it has been a chance for the first time to visit another continent on this earth and to feel that I can give, and we've been able to give, richness of a certain kind that wouldn't have been possible before, and to have had it received in the way that it has been received. To understand, and even in all the press, that whatever is going on the stage, or whatever one says to the press, that it comes from a firm conviction that somehow on this earth, that's been my experience, that no matter how difficult it seems, that somewhere there is underneath and in us all a kind of human quality. Must be. We are, so we put it in simple terms, we're one human family. I don't say that as a phrase. I have found that to be my life. So I started as a son of a slave, yes, in an America that at that time, when I was a boy, determined that somewhere the black brother and sister wouldn't raise their heads. They would always be underneath. That's where Hitler got his ideas, strange to say, from the Ku Klux Klan. That looked pretty tough. But I went to school, found many white chaps who stood by me, and whatever it was, my father, as a minister of the gospel, made me understand that I was my brother's keeper, and that brother had no color. You're right. Often told me about Paul. Often do I remember in the terms of peace his favorite sermon. Yes, from Isaiah. Yeah, I'm going to lay down my sword and shield, turn them into plowshares. So when I sing, I'm going to lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm going to lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. But somewhere, this feeling of peace that we have today could have come out of the lips and the thoughts and the hearts of my slave-entoiled people, as many other beautiful ideas, like there's a balm in Gilead. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There again somewhere from my father, and I say from my forebears, feeling a deep responsibility for my own people, so that at some time today, when I get praised so I go out at lunchtime to see the railway workers, to go out and sing to them, I should say I would. It'd be pretty rough to be in West Australia and not go to the workers. That's what I come from. I come from a toiling, laboring people. Upon the backs of my forebears were built the very primary wealth of America, the very primary wealth from which everything else had to flow. Yes, together with many indentured servants from Ireland and Scotland and Wales. Yes, but on the backs of the slave labor of my people was built the whole empires of both Americas. So, when you see our children of 4 or 6 or 8 saying the time's about up, and it's about time we were free on this earth, you know we mean it. Yes, we mean it. Yes, we're going to get some freedom very soon now. In about 100 years. 100 years in 1963 since they promised us up in 1863. We're not full citizens yet. As I say, it's at a point where children of 4 and 6 have to bear the burden. But when you get a people where the children of 6 and 8 are ready to bear it, you know, there's not much time waiting, man. No, not much time. So I learned, again in my experience, when I got especially, strange to say, not before I came back to America. That came when I was very famous in London, Old Man River, and everywhere I went, you were dealing with the big brass, man. And the Welsh miner said, well, Paul, you may be doing well, but you belong with us. What do you mean by that? Well, Paul, we're down here in these mines. Why don't you come down and see him? I said, I'll be down tomorrow morning. So I went down into the mines. That's right. I'm lucky to be here. Not long ago, the mine wasn't there. Somebody forgot some safety things to see that people could live. And so I went down in the mines. I see they're having a little battle here. I'm on their side. I don't know what the problem is, but I'm on their side. But I was in Wales during the time of the hunger marches. So they were really having a rough time. Somewhere they said, Paul, you belong on our side. What do you mean on your side, man? Said, well, your people suffer. You must belong to them. I said, now you got something there. Because my father said, Paul, no matter how famous you get, remember that you got some cousins down there in North Carolina. They're having a rough time on those tobacco cotton plantations. Yes, right now. So one could never forget that. So I understand what's happening in New Orleans, because at the age of 4, I had it on my head, too, like the little child there. I'm in school, just a little bigger. Somebody says, you're colored, man, you're black. You ain't got any brains. I said, you think so, huh? Let me get them books, man, at the age of 6. What do you learn now? Arithmetic, huh? Okay. And so at the age of 16, what are you learning? At the age of 26, what do you learn? At the age of 62, what am I? I'm still learning to prove, man, that a black man's got some brains. That's right. Whatever the test is, let's have it. Because I know that my father, as a slave, educated himself, that my people have educated themselves, and that it's running out now, that people are so backward you can't educate them. That is running out fast, even in your country. Yeah, it won't hold. Same people are pressing for independence in New Guinea. What are they? They must be Melanesians and Polynesians. I see, at one time in Africa, if you came from Morocco and had a little something, well, that meant you were so far ahead of those black folks down below, Of course, when history started to unveil itself, when you stand in Nubia, plenty of black folks, and you see all that stuff there the Aswan Dam is about to cover, you don't know whether Egypt took it from there first. You can't quite tell, can you? Quite tell. And anthropologists also had a tough time. The black man's over here, and the black man's in Africa. Now, how did he get both places? Now, if he was here first, he had to cross through India and all those homes of the Caucasian folks to get to Africa. Well, you can't have that, brother. You can't have that in anthropology. Don't say that, because that means you'd all be mixed up. No, we got that Aryan thing all fixed up now. You can't go across all those areas.
Well, did he have enough brains? You mean to tell me to go by sea over to Africa? Oh, no, he didn't have enough brains for that. Was there a landmass there? We can't know. So in anthropology, I'm not joking, we are privileged to have been to have come to being in two parts of the world, over here with you and over in Africa. 2 times, because they can't give us enough brains to have gotten from one place to the other, and we can't have mixed up with you that much way back there. Getting mixed up awful fast now, but that was way back. Yeah. So that somewhere, anyhow, to get back to the point, if they can be free in New Guinea and talk about their independence, I think it would be very important, I won't let it pass, that we investigate very much the idea that there is a backward race on your continent that can function. It's what they said about the Africans. That's what they said about my father when he was a slave, and I might not have been here. So when I look at my darker brothers and sisters in Australia and see them look just like my sister and my cousins, and I say, folks, I'll have to come back here and start something here, try to get somebody interested. But I hope you understand that somewhere, whatever I mean sort of to the working class, whatever I mean to a peace movement, I hope I mean that, as I told my brothers and sisters when I saw them at the airport, I hope they begin to treat you like they treat me. Yes, it'll take a lot of understanding, a lot of help, and it'll take a lot of money, and it'll take a lot of understanding that these people are not just, they're good stockmen, they tell me. Know how to handle his horses and sheep. They ain't too dumb for that. Not too dumb to labor for nothing. Well, they won't be too dumb to be full citizens and to function like anybody else. So that's also a part, as I say, life never seems to stop. I certainly came to Australia not to take on any more burdens, but but there you are. When I got to Wales, as I said, I became a part of them. So I became a part of the forces of labor, in the best sense. We're all a part of one family, but sometimes, even my own family, you get a little, in the part of my family in America, I was a little too dark for them once, you know. We got mixed up there, and all the fair Negroes didn't want to have anything to do with the dark ones. Even in my own family, but when I got to be an all-American football player, well, you're so famous, Paul, I guess we could let you in, you're a little dark. But, and so in the family of nations, somewhere we have had to struggle along. But from my own point of view, as I said, it's been a wonderful education of a kind from a human point of view. And it started in Wales. I will always be devoted to them and thankful, because they made me understand for the first time, completely in my heart, not in my mind, that there's no difference of color, Paul. You're not black to us, you're just Paul. And if you're good and black, and it's a good, beautiful color like anything else. But it's a wonderful thing to stand here and know that I could wind up in Wales, as I've said everywhere, middle of the night, hungry maybe, tired, knock on any door. Who's there, Paul? Well, Paul, come in. Have a cup of tea. And I want to say, therefore, that it's very moving as I sort of go away, because in no country have I felt that more deeply, I promise you this is true, than in Australia. Somewhere for 35 years, 30 years, the children, 5 years, brought up by their mothers and fathers on records, to walk out to face an audience that just wants to hear this song or just wants to see you somehow, has been an amazing experience. And so that I have talked to the audience as much. I wouldn't dare talk to this much as I've talked to you audiences here on the platforms in Australia. They said, Paul, oh, wait a minute, hold that there, get on to another song. But somewhere, you've been so patient and so understanding. A lot of things I wanted to do, and the concert's too short. Management says, now don't give you got to get out that place. The place has got to lock up. But I want to sort of talk about so many things and haven't had the time and won't have this time. But I certainly want to hear the last, especially with what I call the closest kinds of friends, because you too have been in a struggle and will continue in a struggle. Would that it might not be a struggle. And I'm sure that everybody is very decent and everybody wants peace. We know that. But we also know that we live in a kind of way of life that when the emphasis has got to be, as it seems to be in our part of the world, on the individual. Yes, a wonderful idea. Oh, and completely basic. Obviously, we're talking about people. But Not always just me or you. Maybe it's got to be my family, my wife, my children, my grandchildren. And maybe it's got to be somebody else's grandchildren and family. Maybe it's got to be a whole nation. Maybe it's got to be a whole world. So for me, when I see in my music that Bach, the great Bach, says Schweitzer, what was he? The greatest composer of all time. Did he, like a later Stravinsky or a lot of folk, decide that you couldn't use the music of the people, that you had to make it out of your own brain, that the people couldn't create anything? And yet, whenever I feel down, and I remember that last speech of Othello, even backstage, before I went on, soft you a word or two before you go, I would hum to myself, when in the hour of utmost need, we know not where to turn for aid, when days and nights of anxious thought, nor help nor counsel, yet have brought. That was the last melody arranged by Bach, blind on his bed. The great Bach, who did what? Who summed up all that went before and prophesied what would come after. And that could only be done because he forgot himself as a person, as one individual. He identified himself not only with his people, but with ages past. And as Schweitzer said, he was a collective soul. What an idea. And so I love to sing the folk songs of people because they were created by generations gone. And I have it in my own life when I sing Deep River, a noble melody created by my people in the midst of slavery. And yet out of it came a melody of which even Beethoven would have been proud. Deep river, my home is over Jordan. Deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into Cameron. And so, somewhere going through life, to feel that one too has a little part of that, of expressing at all times the feelings of your fellow human beings. And it's very difficult for us as we struggle because we live in a society built upon the one. Yes, private profit, gain, the necessity to industrialize in a kind of industrial servitude thousands of others unless one is careful. This is a very difficult life in which to live. So one must be thankful, say, for the early Chartrists. One must be thankful for Jerusalem. One must be thankful for those who can chart and see another kind of society built upon the good of the many. In Negro life in America tomorrow, if we had power, could we begin to argue among ourselves who's going to be the first 10 millionaires? Or would we have to think of what's going to happen to 18 million of our people? That's what we'd have to think about. It seems to me here on a new continent, still a new continent, that this somewhere, no matter how it's built, I felt that among the Australian people, some concern for everybody else. Don't lose that one. And you're going to need a lot of concern, because somewhere the masters sitting in the Pentagon, the masters sitting there have mapped out a very strange role for you here in Australia if you're not careful. And it's going to be awful hard to duck because they've got most of the investment in here already. Not quite simple to duck it, but they mean that somewhere you play a main role here in Australia. Against peace, yes, because a lot of guys over there don't want peace in my own land. And I say it knowing that It can get back to them. I've been saying it all over, so they don't have to worry about my saying it here. There's one thing that an American has to do today. One says, what happened to the Germans when Hitler was there? And someday my grandchildren, or the children will come out to say, what were you doing? But Grandpa Paul or great-great-great-grandpa Paul, I read about you. What were you doing when they sat here and charted the death of the human race? What did you do? Well, I'm saying to them, man, I'm doing all I can. I'm going to keep on doing it, too. But somewhere, so this is a responsibility to speak out. Whatever happens, willing to take that. But somewhere you have a great responsibility here in Australia, and I want to thank you for the struggle that you are making. It's a very magnificent one. We sit back on the waterfront, I was telling some friends today, and we say, man, it's going rough here. Now, maybe we'll have to fight back here. I'm a life member of the Bridges Union there on the coast. What shall we do? Well, I tell you one thing. If we get rough over here, those Australian wharfies will be on your side, man. They'll help you. Yeah. What they tell me in Indonesia places. Well, thank you for all of that. And I've seen a peace movement already, without question. That is a source of great pride. That I can be met in every city by peace groups. Couldn't do that in America today. Couldn't quite do it. Even appalling. And certainly when I walk in, it gets a little rough. Now, what is that for? And you have settled it for me. Even in the press. I want to thank you. I'm just a human being. Yes, trying to find my way. Yes, I wish I could be sweet all the time, man. But when those guys started playing with my children and everything else, I get a little mad, man. Get a little angry. When I get angry, I can be awful rough, yeah. Had to be. I was a football player. Went out there, one colored boy amongst all those guys, and even my own team started to jump on me one day. I said, what's going on here? The football's very rough. You need some protection. Even my own team jumped on me. Got a little nervous about having a nigger on the team. Well, I said, man. So I would smile. Don't hurt me. You know you mustn't do that. I'm just a little boy out here. And sometimes they say, well, I don't care whether you're a little boy and I'd be here. What'd you do that for? And I'd have to strike back. I was trying to explain to a couple of fellows. I said, you should have been rough like that, Mr. Robeson. I'm sorry. But I had to strike back. I learned some in our game. We sort of play like this and so forth. And I learned a very, very nice little trick of knocking the box out of a grocery box so a fellow's head got here by mistake. Ooh! And I looked at, but I was very nice. I picked him up. I didn't hit him. But it got so that at the end of the game, however rough it was, they all stood on the field and shook my hand and said, well, we're very proud to know that we've been taught differently. We've been taught wrong. We read in the books that any colored boy, if you just looked at him hard, he's going to run. I said, well, don't you believe that next time. You might get hurt. But as I say, sometimes when you read in the paper, sounds a little rough. You're right, it was rough. That's right, I said it. That's right, I said it. I've been in many parts of the world. I believe, for example, the Soviet Union wants peace. I believe that. I've been there. They had, by the count, over 20 million killed in the last war. 20 million. Maybe 40, they don't know. Nobody can tell me they want war. Nobody can quite tell me, however, that maybe Adenauer, in a resurgence of fascism, might not want war. And certainly not Mr. Franco. So we have the obligation in so-called democracies today to understand that we may be supporting, if we are supporting the American foreign policy, a policy of pro-fascism, and I mean precisely that. And I, as a Democrat, and as a guy brought up like it, will have nothing to do with it. I was in Republican Spain, and I know the nature of fascism, and I will support no kind of policy that has anything to do with the resurgence of what I would call the death of the human family. Nothing whatsoever. And I will stand and speak the truth as I see it. I think they want peace from the socialist lands, and in order to illustrate that, just very fast, I want to end. There was another happening, because the most important thing to me about the Soviet Union, strange to say, quite apart from color, was that I went in 1934, 17 years after the revolution, and I went to Leningrad and looked at a people called the Samoyeds. They had come from the northern country, from the so-called Eskimo peoples. The Samoyed in Russian means self-eater. Self-eater. That was their own name in 1917, which certainly presumed that they were a rather backward people. And the Yakuti, who were something like the peoples of East Africa. In 1934, I went to the university in Leningrad and saw these people in the universities. I saw their fisheries in the north, knew they had fisheries, And during the war, among the Yakuti in the Urals, they had so far developed in that time that the whole steel industry of the Don Basin was moved to the Urals, where they had a lot to do with its functioning from then on and even today. That is, I found out in the Soviet Union that there was no such thing on earth as a backward people. And I got back to England, and many of the leading anthropologists were explaining, Robeson, you keep talking about Africa and being free. Sounds silly today. Of course, I did 1934, 35. Nobody could think it could come along this fast. They said, Robeson, you're crazy. You know, there's no culture in Africa. Maybe in a couple of 100 years there'll be something. It could take 1,000. But let's be just, be modest and say 250 or 300 years. I said, oh, my goodness, how you figure that out? But that was it. Well, I said, I was just in the Soviet Union, and they have done something even within less than a generation. Oh, but he said, that's in a communist country. Oh, is that so? So I'm supposed to wait 250 instead of a generation? Take it, man. So for my money, there is an awful burden on this part of the world and the so-called Western world to prove their point. They must prove it. But whatever it is, let's see which system can work the best, but we certainly can't afford to have any nonsense of the human family being extinguished. So we have a tremendous battle. I'm here as a member of the World Peace Council, and whatever we do on earth, there's no one way, say, that can win. Just one way. We're all kinds of different people. We're doing very well in the Western world, America, Australia, New Zealand, England, and so forth. They're also doing pretty well out there. We don't expect to disappear from our part of the world. I don't expect to see 600 million Chinese and 250 million Russian people disappear from the face of the earth either. They're sitting right there and got everything. They got everything to stay there with, too, I would say. Yeah. So they're likely to stay there. So that somewhere we have to think, not of imposing our way, no, or having it imposed. We have got to deal, let us say, with a solution of the contradiction of opposites. That's rather Marxist. I better be careful about that. But we have got to find some central point to which around which we can go. And I feel that the World Peace Council is doing a fine job. The other peace councils, whatever it is, he must find peace, live in peace somewhere. Understand the other part of the world. So I keep going all around. I hope that I'll get back to see you very soon. Hope nobody will keep me from wandering in. They did that once in Canada. And I hope to get back to my own land to see my people. And it may be a little, as I say, this little question of tactics when I get back. But I'm very firm on the point that there are no sort of conservative folk in America who want to take that little piece of American earth that belongs to me, being very individual this time, away from me. So I'll get back there, don't worry. And wish you all success in your struggles, and we'll finish. Build a road of peace before us. Build it wide and deep and long. Speed the slow and check the eager. Help the weak and curb the strong. None shall push aside another. None shall let another fall. March beside me, O my brothers, all for one. And the one for all.
You know, these Robesons are really slaves to themselves. They've both been out today. Paul went up to Midland, as he told you, in the blazing heat, and Slender went down to the university. And only just got back to make it for this afternoon. But she still wants to have a few words.
Thank you very much. I've been thinking about you When I was in England preparing for the trip, I thought, well, finally, we're going out to Australia. And this is wonderful and terrific because we've been hoping and planning to come to Australia for many years. And what with one thing and another, and a war and so on, we have not been able to come until now. But in England, I thought of coming to Australia as of coming to the other end of the world. And when I got here in 2 days flying, I found I wasn't at all at the other end of the world, and I thought, well, pardon me, my mistake. I feel very much in the center of the world here, and I think it's extraordinary that I should have made such a mistake because I should know better. I was so indignant with myself about this that I went out and bought a map. It's a great big map, but it has Australia in the center. And I particularly wanted this kind of map so that I could see where I was in relation to all the other places. I find that I really am in the center in a way. And I think that it is in thinking of Australia as an outpost, as I've often heard it called. I think either I'm wrong or somebody else is wrong, because it looks to me like a bridge.
Heartfelt greetings, dear friends in Manchester. It is deeply moving for me to know that you and so many others throughout Britain are speaking out in behalf of my right to travel, my right to resume my career as an international artist, which I began some 30 years ago. Though I must send you these words from afar, I can say that never have I felt closer to you than I do today. The warmth of your friendship reaches out across the barriers which temporarily separate us and rekindles the memories of many happy years that I spent among you. Here in my home in New York, I recall your own great city as another home to me, a place where I came so often to sing, and where I always was inspired by the flourishing cultural life of Manchester, the splendid orchestras, the outstanding contributions to classical music and the other arts, the great newspapers, and by the richness of the folk culture of Lancashire, which has given to England and the world the artistry of dear Gracie Fields and so many others. I can never forget that it was the people of Manchester and of the other industrial areas of Britain who gave me the understanding of the oneness of people, a concept upon which I have based my career as an artist and citizen. I recall how a Manchester friend explained to me how closely together we two were bound by the history and human suffering and aspiration. He told me of the life of bitter hardship and toil, which his father and grandfather knew in the mills, those dark, satanic mills which Blake cried out against in words of fire, and of how the cotton which his forefathers wove linked them with other toilers whose sweat and blood produced that cotton in faraway America, the Negro slaves of my own father, my own people. And I remember so well my last visit to Manchester in 1949. The warmth of your welcome at the arena. The thousands who assembled to support our struggle in America to save the lives of the Trenton Six. That struggle, as you know, was won. The Negro youths who had been sentenced to die in the electric chair were freed. The people of Manchester and other British cities, other Scotch and Welsh cities, and people of many lands had a great share in that victory. More than a century ago, you welcomed Frederick Douglass, our great Negro leader in the anti-slavery movement, when he toured your country in behalf of his people in chains. In his famous farewell speech to the British people, a classic document in Negro history and American history, Douglass, speaking on March 30th, 1847, noted that people had traveled from your city to attend his last great rally in London. Manchester is represented on this occasion, he said, as well as a number of other towns. And thanking the British public for their warm-hearted support for his cause, Douglass said, "Wherever I have gone, I have been treated with the utmost kindness, with the greatest deference, the most assiduous attention, and I have every reason to love England." My own heart echoes these words of Frederick Douglass. I deeply appreciate the concern that has been expressed in behalf of my civil rights by the Manchester Guardian and other British newspapers and magazines, and by all the many groups and individuals who have urged the State Department to grant me a passport. I am looking forward to a concert appearance soon, on February 11th to be exact, in Toronto, Canada, and to the pleasure of hearing once more the friendly accents of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. This partial victory, the lifting of the ban on my leaving the United States to go to Canada, strengthens my belief that the pressure of democratic opinion here and abroad will compel the State Department to relent in their refusal to permit me to travel to other countries. Or perhaps the courts may insist that they relent. I send warm greetings to my brothers and sisters among you who come from Africa, the land of my fathers, and from the Caribbean, places which I intend to visit at the earliest opportunity. Yes, I have a lot of traveling to do, and I am eager to be free and on my way, to be free to sing, to act, to meet old friends and new ones, free to be at your side and at the side of people everywhere whose hearts sing peace and freedom, brotherhood and love. And so I say in the words of a great people from their song Zognit Keen Mao, the hour for which we yearn will yet arrive, and our marching song will thunder, we survive.
Country's anthem, shout your land's undying fame, light the wondrous tale of nations with your people's golden name. Tell your father's noble story, raise on high your country's sign. Join then in the final glory, brother, lift your flag with mine. Hail the Son of Peace, new rising, hold the war clouds closer first. blend our banners, oh my brothers, in the rainbow of the world. Red as blood and blue as heaven, wise as age and proud as youth, melt our banner wonder woven in the one great light of truth. Build the road of peace before us, build it wide and deep and long. Speed the slow and check the eager, help the weak and curb the strong. None shall push aside another, none shall let another fall. March beside me, oh my brothers, all for one and one for all.
Rather strange, you know. As a young man, I never thought of being a singer or an actor. Somebody asked me that on the train the other day, coming down from Stratford to London. As a youth, my ambition was to be a lawyer. My father had a wonderful voice, and I thought of standing in the courts. And I studied at Columbia University in New York, one of our leading law universities. But I didn't stay in it for very long. About the second year in college, I began acting in plays by some chance, and it helped me to get through law school, helped pay my way. My first job was in the Emperor Jones down at the Provincetown Theater, made famous by Eugene O'Neill and many of the other people in the American theater. And I had a chance to play the Emperor Jones. I played it here later in 1925 with the Ambassadors. A very interesting part. What was most important at that time was that I got about 15 pounds a week, which was an awful lot of money. One sort of a law clerk doesn't get for quite some time in America. I remember the first night after I'd played down in Provincetown Theater, I came back to law school, and Dean Stone, who later became Chief Justice of the American Supreme Court, was standing in the door. He looked at me and he said, "Robeson, what have you been doing?" And he had some papers in his hand. I was rather frightened. I said, "Well, I guess this is it." The dean says, "Well, I read some nice things about you. They say you're a very fine actor." I said, "Well, let me see, Dean." I hadn't seen the papers, and I was fairly famous in my first try as an actor. A lot of folk stop me. I suppose they think that perhaps when I sang it here, Old Man River, 1928 at the Drury Lane, that's the first time that I had perhaps come to England or certainly have sung. But there's a very interesting story behind the fact that I came over way back in 1922. And not only came over, but had the privilege and great pleasure of playing a whole summer with Mrs. Patrick Campbell, which certainly to me seems like almost unbelievable. I'd come out of school, had played in a play called Taboo in New York. Mrs. Campbell had renamed it Voodoo. The playwright was a friend of Mrs. Patrick Campbell, a Miss Wyborg from New York. And we opened finally in Liverpool I landed, I remember, at Southampton and went up to Blackpool, and I must say Blackpool intrigued me. I never forget, I was up there last year yet, and I remember the waterfront was very beautiful to me. I used to go in and sit in the pubs and take a fruit drink every now and then. And then we went on from Blackpool to Liverpool, and an extraordinary thing happened. In the play, which was about the Negro South and then going back to Africa, I was to be some kind of a chieftain. I fall asleep at the end of the first act, and sort of in a dream, I sort of fall asleep and supposed to, I whistle and being very gay, and before you know it, I'm back in Africa, and I tried my best falling asleep to whistle, and I still can't whistle, as you can hear me right now. I just can't whistle to this day, and so I broke out into a sort of Israel was in Egypt's land, let my people go, into a very beautiful spiritual that I remembered as a child. And as I sort of hummed this, I heard a voice from the wings. Sing it louder, sing it louder. And if you've ever heard Mrs. Patrick Campbell, her whispers on the stage. So I began to sing this very beautiful spiritual. And this was the first song I sang in Great Britain. And then, to continue the story, I was quite startled when I finished like tonight was sort of singing unaccompanied at that time on the stage. My Go Down Moses, let my people go. I still heard this whisper from the stage, sing another. And so I really learned, I guess, one of my first lessons in acting. I got very sleepy again. I thought very naturally, fell asleep, sort of started falling asleep again and sang some others. And it even went further that during the course of the play, when Mrs. Pat sort of lost a line and didn't quite remember one of those lines, she would turn to me and say, one of those wonderful gestures of hers that there's now another song coming, as if it were a part of the play. And Miss Wyborg finally saw the play later in the week in Liverpool. The play had really turned into a musical. Luckily for me, I got very nice reviews from it and found out that I was a singer for the first time that I knew.
The Creation, a Negro Sermon by James Weldon Johnson. And God stepped out on space, and he looked around and said, I'm lonely. I'll make a world. And far as the eye of God could see, darkness covered everything, blacker than 100 midnights down in a cypress swamp. Then God smiled, and the light broke, and the darkness rolled up on one side, and the light stood shining on the other. And God said, that's good. Then God reached out and took the light in his hands, and God rolled the light around in his hands until he made the sun. And he set that sun a-blazing in the heavens, and the light that was left from making the sun, God gathered it up in a shining ball and flung it against the darkness, spangling the night with the moon and stars. Then down between the darkness and the light, he hurled the world. And God said, that's good. Then God himself stepped down, and the sun was on his right hand, and the moon was on his left, and the stars were clustered about his head, and the earth was under his feet. And God walked, and where he trod, his footsteps hollowed the valleys out and bulged the mountains up. Then he stopped and looked and saw that the earth was hot and barren. So God stepped over to the edge of the world, and he spat out the 7 seas. He batted his eyes, and the lightning flashed. He clapped his hands, and the thunders rolled, and the waters above the earth came down. The cooling waters came down. Then the green grass sprouted, and the little red flowers blossomed. The pine tree pointed his finger to the sky, and the oak spread out his arms. The lakes cuddled down in the hollows of the ground, and the rivers ran down to the sea. And God smiled again, and the rainbow appeared and curled itself around his shoulder. Then God raised his arm, and he waved his hand over the sea and over the land, and he said, "Bring forth, bring forth." And quicker than God could drop his hand, fishes and fowls and beasts and birds swam the rivers and the seas, roamed the forests and the woods, and split the air with their wings. And God said, "That's good." Then God walked around, and God looked around on all that he had made. He looked at his sun, and he looked at his moon, and he looked at his little stars. He looked on his world with all its living things. And God said, "I'm lonely still." Then God sat down on the side of a hill where he could think. By a deep, wide river he sat down. With his head in his hands, God thought and thought, till he thought, "I'll make me a man." Up from the bed of the river, God scooped the clay, and by the bank of the river he kneeled him down. And there the great God Almighty, who lit the sun and fixed it in the sky, who flung the stars to the most far corner of the night, who rounded the earth in the middle of his hand, this great God, like a mother bending over her baby, kneeled down in the dust, toiling over a lump of clay, till he shaped it in his own image. Then into it he blew the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Amen. Amen.